Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Baba Basra Lamed Aleph, Baba Basra 31. Today's Daf Yomi is dedicated for a Shmira for the Chayalim, Matzah for the Shvuyim, Yeshua for Am Yisrael, and this Eis Tzara. So we're going to start on Baba Basra Lamed Aleph on the top line. So we have the case as follows. Zel Mer Shalav Hosai. Let's say we have Reuven and Shimon. Reuven says, this piece of property is my father's. Zel Mer Shalav Hosai. And Shimon says, no, this piece of property is my father's. Hi, I see Sahade Davase. So Reuven brings witnesses that it was indeed his father's. Hi, I see Sahade Davase. The high and Shimon, I see Sahadi, the Achoshnei Chazaka, where Shimon brings witnesses that he's had the property for 3 years and he's been consuming it. So it's witnesses versus the Chazaka. So Amar Rabba Malo Lashaker. So basically, the problem is Shimon's claim was not the right claim, because Shimon should have made a claim that I bought it from you. But he didn't make that claim. He just has a claim of chazaka, and it's a chazaka without witnesses, because Reuven says, I have witnesses that was my father's. Shimon doesn't say how he got it from his father. So therefore, it's a chazaka without a taina. So, but if he had wanted to, he could have very easily said, I bought it from your father, but he didn't say that. So therefore, Amarabba Malo Shaker. Why would he need to lie? This person, Shimon, who has the property, he's the machzik. Why should he lie when he says it was from his father and he inherited from them? If he wanted to, he could have just said that I bought it from your father, and then he would have been believed. I bought it from you. So he could have just said, I got it from you. I bought it from you. So therefore, why should he lie? He could have easily said what the case was. So Abaye says to his Rebbe, so Rabbah is giving it into the Machzik, but Abaye argues with his Rebbe. Rashbam says, Talmido Abaye, his student Abaye. Abaye says, Mal Shakar b'makom edim lo amrinan. He says, no, we don't say this concept of Malul Shakir, that if he was going to lie, he could have easily given a better lie. We don't say that in this case, because witnesses are contradicting his words, because witnesses say that it was the other person's father. And so therefore, the chazaka is nothing, because it's not with a taina. It's a false claim, because he says it was his father's, and witnesses say it was the other father's. And so therefore, Abaye says, Mal Shaker, we don't say, oh, I could have easily, if I was going to lie, I could have said a better lie, because there are Adim, there are witnesses who contradict what he said. And the law is like Abaye, because Rabbah himself admits to it, and Rabbah changes what he said. So the Gemara goes on. And as the Gemara says, Hadar, so now this person who he can't say this claim anymore because there are witnesses that contradict it, Amarle, he says, in it, yeah, it's my father's. Vizabanta minach. It was my father's, but excuse me, in it, yes, it was your father's. Vizabanta minach, and I bought it from you. So he modifies his claim. He no longer is saying it was his father, he's saying it was your father's, and I bought it from him. Which, if it had started out from the beginning, would have been a strong argument. But hi the Amarlach Adavasihi, the reason why I said to you that it was my father's, I didn't mean it was literally my father's. I just meant the Samachli Allah Kedabasi. And I was certain, I was so secure in the knowledge that this was my property, as though it was my father's, because as though it was my father's. That's what I meant. So he basically wants to change his argument. So this is what we call toin v'chozer v'toin. So the Gemara says the case where you make a claim, then you have to go back on your claim and make a new claim. So if it's a case of toin v'chozer v'toin, what will be the law? Do we allow you to change your argument in the court? Toin choser toin or in choser toin. Do we allow you to do this or not? So Ua Amar toin choser toin. Uan says, yeah, you could do it. And therefore, we're going to believe him when he now says, I bought it from you. Nardai Amri, Eno toin choser toin. Nardai say, no, we don't allow you to do that. Now, even though Ula says you're a toin, v'choser toin, even though Ula says you can make the claim and go back and make the claim again, Modi Ula himself would admit, Hecha da Amarle shel avosai v'lo shel avosecha. Ula himself would admit in a case where he said, it was my father's, but not your father's, there even Ula would admit. So in a case where he says, that from the outset, his initial claim was it's not your father's, and now he's changing it, he's contradicting himself, then Ula would admit the Inotoim Choser Toim. Meaning to say, Ula would say, yeah, if you actually want to say something you said was factually, you're now completely disputing that, that we're not going to allow. In this case, the case that Ula allowed, he was just explaining what he said, not completely contradicting what he said. And so therefore, if it was a complete contradiction, then Ulo also would say you can't go back b'choser v'toin v'toin, toin and choser v'toin. And furthermore, and also in a case davekai beidina v'lotain v'asa me'avrai v'toin eno choser v'toin. And the second case where Ulo does not allow you to be toin v'choser v'toin is a case where you said your argument in the court, then you go outside the court. Presumably your lawyers, your friends, they told you what to say. And then you come back into the court and make a new claim that Ua would not allow. My timer. Not say Agmari, because his claim was finished. And so therefore, who taught it to him? Who taught him this claim? His friends. Rashi says, Ta'anase Agmari, his friends and his relatives taught him what to say. Vita Ta'anase Agmare. Okay, now Moda Nardai, even though Nardai say Eino Choser V'toin, that once you make a claim, you can't go back and make it again. They themselves would admit that Heicha da Amrei Shalavosai Shalachua Me'avosecha to Choser V'toin. In this case, where he says it was my father's, but he bought it from your father, so that's how we explain your witnesses. Then he would allow it, because that's the case of not changing, but adding on. And Rashbam says, "The eno oker dvar varishonim klal el mosif alein." He's just adding on, so therefore it's okay. And also, and also furthermore, where he said certain words outside, and he didn't make the claim. He said certain words outside, but he didn't make the claim in the court. And he only comes to the court and makes the claim. There also, Nardai would say the choser v'toin. There, where he didn't make the argument in the court, but he just made it outside the court, Rashbam the Nardai would say you can go back and make the claim. My time. What's the reasoning? Avid inish de lo megali tanase el bedina, because that's the way of the world, that people don't want to reveal their best arguments prior to actually getting into the courtroom, because we don't want people to you don't want the other side to learn from your mistakes. The Rashbam qualifies this. You don't want the other side to know about your arguments. The Rashbam says, this refers to general claims. But let's say he says something explicitly in front of witnesses outside the court. Then like, for example, he says, well, I owe, he says explicitly to witnesses, I owe $100. Well, that's an admission. And so then they can't reject that in the court. So obviously there's shades here of nuance. Amar Amemar, so now Amemar taught, Ana Naharda, Ana, I am a Nahardian. Visvirally, the Toin v'choser v'toin. Even though I'm a Nardian, I come from Nardai, I hold like Ula that you can make your claim and go back and make your claim again. That you can, Rashbam says you can be mitake, you can fix your first language, even though it's a little bit of a contradiction, because he's not completely uprooting it. And that's the halacha. Okay, so now Zelmer Shalavosai. Next case. This one says it's my father's. V'zel mer shalavosai. And this one says it's my father's. Hi isi sahade da'avase v'achli shani chazaka. V'hai isi sahade da'achli shani chazaka. So he says, the case is this one says it's my father's, and this one says it's my father's. This one brings witnesses that, okay, so the case is as follows. So he says as follows. Zelmer Shalavose. This one says it's my father's. Zelmer Shalavose. So Reuben says it's my father's, and Shimon says it's my father's property. Hi, I see Sahade Davose. So this one, Va'acha Shnei Chazaka. So Reuben brings witnesses that it was his father's, and he also ate it, he consumed it for 3 years. And this one brings witnesses that those 3 years, I actually was having the chazaka. So the witnesses are contradicting each other. So the witnesses about the chazaka are contradicting each other, but the other person has testimony that it was his father's. So one person has testimony that it was his father's, and both of them have testimony that they have a chazaka, that they were using the land. So Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says the uki achila v'hade achila, the testimony about the chazaka is cancels each other out because there's 2 competing groups of witnesses. But the testimony about the father, nobody is contradicting that, and so therefore we're going to establish if that's still in existence. Uki achila v'hade achila uki ara b'chazkas avasa. And so since the testimony about the father had is still in existence, we're going to put the land into the chazaka of the father. And so therefore, Reuven, who had the witnesses that it was his father's, that's going to remain. So and so therefore Reuven will get the property. Amrle Rava says, why? No, Rava says both of the witnesses are contradicting each other. Mean to say, because the witness is who said that it was Reuven's father, these are the same witnesses who said Reuven had it for 3 years. So therefore, since these 2 groups are contradicting each other, one of them is for sure disqualified. And so therefore, since we don't know which one, both witnesses are going to be canceled out. That's what Rava says. So Rav Nachman says, we're going to put the property into the hands of Reuven. And Reuven says, Shimon says, no, it's a contradictory testimony. And so therefore, nobody can claim it. And so therefore, we go back to the principle of Kol the Olim Gvar, whoever is stronger will get to take it. So Rav Nachman says, Amar Le, Rav Nachman says back to Rava, Nehida Iskachash Ba'achilasa. Yeah, the witnesses are contradicting each other with respect to the chazaka who consumed it for 3 years. We're on the top of 31b. Ba'avasa Miskachash. But are they really contradicting each other with respect to the testimony about the father? Nobody's contradicting that. Everybody admits to the fact that they testified that it was initially Reuven's father. So that's a valid testimony. So Rav is saying we can accept the testimony. Rav is saying we can't, and Rav Nachman is saying we can accept the testimony. So Rav Nachman bepukta to Rav Huna Rav Chisda kamiflagi. So maybe Rav and Rav Nachman have an argument, really the same argument that Rav Huna and Rav Chisda have, that we have in Shavuos. What's the case there? Let's say you have 2 witnesses, 2 groups of witnesses who are contradicting each other about one testimony. So Rashbam tells us what we're talking about. Let's say 2 people say that Reuven borrowed $100 from Shimon, and then 2 other witnesses say, no, Reuven didn't borrow that. The day you say Reuven borrowed it, he was with us in a different place. So therefore, they're contradicting each other. So therefore, such testimony, the Torah doesn't believe the latter one but over the first one. And so therefore, they're contradicting each other. This is not a case of Eidim Zomamin. This is a case of Hakasha. And so therefore, since they're contradicting each other, what do we do? Says Rav Huna, Zupa b'fnei ato meida. So what's their law with respect to other testimony in the world? What's going to be the law with respect to whether or not they could give other testimony? So Rav Huna says, yeah, they could give other testimony. We're not going to assume that they're disqualified witnesses. And so therefore, Rav Huna said that each one can come on their own and testify. Rav Chisda says, Bahade Sade Shakri Lamale. So Rav Chisda says, no, these are false witnesses. They can't testify about any other case. So Lema Rav Nachman, who says that we believe the testimony that the father had it, maybe he's going to rule like Rav Huna that we accept their testimony in other areas. Lema Rav Nachman Amar Rav Huna. The Rava, and Rava says we reject it. It must be like Rav Chisda, who says that such testimony is rejected. Gemara says no. Aliba de Rav Chisda kol yamalu pligi. Everybody would say that according to Rav Chisda, everybody would agree that Rav Chisda says that once you're disqualified, and so therefore, there's no way that Rav Nachman would say, even Rav Nachman would agree that Rav Chisda would say the testimony is not acceptable here. But Rav Huna, who says that to go and testify in other areas, that's where there's an argument whether or not Rava is really necessarily arguing with Rav Huna. Rav Nachman Rav Huna. Clearly, Rav Nachman holds like Rav Huna because Rav Nachman accepts the testimony here about the father. But Rava would say, Ad kan lo kama Rav Huna. Why does Rav Huna accept that testimony? Ela edus acheres for a completely different testimony. Also edus, but within the same testimony, like what they're doing here, where they're saying this property belongs to Ruvain because he has a chazaka and because we saw his father owned it. That we're not going to accept the testimony about the father there. Hadar, but then what happened was that same person who Rav Nachman initially had given the property to Reuven in that case, but then Shimon went, Hadar Aisi Saade Davasahi. He now also brought witnesses that it was his father's. So now he has his own set of witnesses. So Amar Rav Nachman Ananach Dine Anan Maskinaway. Rav Nachman says, look, we took it away, the property, and we put it into the hands of Reuven, but now that Shimon brought witnesses, I'll put it back into the area, and each one can try and claim it. And we'll have the principle of Kol Da'alam Gvar. Who's ever stronger will get it. So what's the reasoning about Kol Da'alam Gvar? So whoever is really more committed to it, the more committed person is the one who really owns it. And some say it's with strength, some say it's with proofs, and then Rav Nachman gives an important principle. He says, we're not worried that people are going to laugh at the court. Now, first we gave it to Reuven, now we take it away from Reuven. We're not going to worry that the people are going to laugh at the reputation of the court, but this is the principle. Once we establish that the court made a mistake or the court gave a ruling which is not correct, we're going to reverse it and we'll elusive the Beidina Chashina. So massive Rava, and some say Vitem Rav Zera challenged Rav Nachman's position. So how could it be? We have a case as follows. This is from Ksubos. We had this in Yevamos. Shnayim Omer Meis, Ushnayim Omer Lo Meis. Two people say the woman's husband has died, and two people say he has not died. Shnayim Omer Niskarsha, Shnayim Omer Monis. Two people say she was divorced, two people say she wasn't. She can't get married. The Imni states, but if she got married, we don't force her to get divorced. Whereas Rabbi Nachman bar Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Nachman bar Rabbi Yossi says, no, if she got married, we force her to get divorced under those circumstances. Amar Rabbi Nachman bar Yossi, so Rabbi Nachman bar Rabbi Yossi, who says that we force her to divorce if she gets married, says, when do I say we force her to get divorced? Where the witnesses came and then she got married. of Onises, but if first she got married and then the witnesses came, then we don't force her to get divorced. Meaning to say, if the witnesses came, if she got married and then the witnesses came, we don't force her to get divorced under those circumstances. And so we see from here that if she, so we see from here that the reason why we don't force her to get divorced, Rashbam says, is because the chashina was elusive to Beidina, because we're concerned about the reputation of the court. So therefore, this contradicts Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said we reversed the ruling once we made, and here we're saying we don't because the Zilus Medina Amar way. So Rav Nachman responds to that. No, Ana Sfira Ma'avid Uvda. Rav Nachman said, I thought I was going to make a ruling. Ana Savri Ma'avid Uvda. I thought that I was going to say we're not concerned about Zilus Bedina, and I was going to take the property away from Reuven and give it to Shimon. But Hashta de Usvinan At. But now that you challenge my view from this brisa, v'usvan Rav Hamnuna b'Surya, and also Rav Hamnuna from either Surya or Surah. There's a different girsa about this, where Rav Hamnuna was sitting there learning. He also challenged this idea. Lo avdina ba'uvda. I'm not going to do this matter, and so therefore I'm going to not ruin the court's reputation by reversing the ruling. Nafak avad uvda. And then Rav Nachman went out and he did reverse the ruling. So just to understand, Rav Nachman first ruled the property goes to Reuven, but then Shimon brought witnesses, and Rav Nachman took it away and gave it to Shimon put it back into disputed property. And he said, I'm not worried about the Zilusa de Beidina. But then Rav challenged him, or some say Rabbi Zera challenged him and say, no, from a case in Yevamos or Ksubos where we do have to be worried about Zilusa de Beidina. Rav Nachman says, oh, okay, fine. Now I changed my mind again, and I am worried about Zilusa de Beidina, so I'll give it back to Reuven. But then Rav Nachman went ahead, says the Gemara says, and actually did take it away from Reuven. So Rav Nachman reversed himself around 3 times here. Nafak va'avad uvda. He went and he reversed himself, and he gave the property from Reuven and put it back into the public domain. Man the one who saw this, Stavar ta'usa hibiya. They thought, oh, Rav Nachman made a mistake. He forgot the brisa. Well, it's not actually. It's clear. This is not talking about this exact. It's not still the same case with Reuven, but in general, he reversed himself. So the one who saw him reverse himself said, oh, he's making a mistake because he didn't remember the brisa, which says that you're not supposed to reverse yourself. Velohi, it's not the case. He remembered the source, but he decided mishum detalia ba'asli ravare. But he decided to rely upon very strong ropes, meaning to say he has a different source that says you should reverse yourself. And the Gemara is going to bring the source of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the Mishnah from Ksubos, which says that Rav Nachman relied upon to say that we don't have to be concerned about the Zelusa de Beidina, the reputation of the court. So let's just go on a little bit. It's not Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ein Malin L'Kuhuna. Rabbi Yehuda says Ein Malin L'Kuhuna Al Pi Eid Echad. Rabbi Yehuda says that if we have a Kohen, we do not establish, if we have a person who has one witness that says he's a Kohen, we do not allow this one person to be established as a Kohen, therefore to serve in the base of Mikdash, or to eat Truma, or to give the Birkas Kohanim on the basis of one witness. And says Rabbi Elazar a Masai, when does Rabbi Yehuda say that we don't allow him on the basis of one witness to be established as a Kohen? When they're in a place where there are witnesses who are challenging this Kohen. But where there are no witnesses who are challenging this Kohen, it's just rumors. We allow this one witness to be enough to determine that he's a Kohen. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Askan, so again, we have 3 positions here. Rabbi Yehuda says we do not allow one witness to establish him as a Kohen. Rabbi Lazar says if there's nobody challenging him, then one witness is allowed to make him a Kohen. And Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Askan that you do allow one witness to be a Kohen. So the Gemara says, well, what's the difference between Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and Rabbi Lazar? What's the difference between Rabbi Lazar says if there's nobody challenging, you allow one witness to declare him a Kohen, and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that you allow him to be a Kohen on the basis of one witness. So what's the difference between Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and Rabbi Lazar? They're the same thing. And if you want to say, let's say there's one person who's challenging him, and that's a distinction. Now, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel would still accept him, and Rabbi Lazar would not. The Rabbi Lazar Savar Irachad that even if it's just one witness challenging him, we don't accept him. Rashbag Savar Irashrei. Rashbag says, no, you need two witnesses challenging him in order not to accept him. It can't be. V'amar Rav Yochanan Divrei Akol ein error pachas mi shnayim. When you have these people challenging the kuna, it has to be a minimum of two. Ella error trey. Ein error pachas mi shnayim. So what we're talking about is Ella error trey. Both Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and Rabbi Lazar are talking about a case where Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and Rabbi Lazar are talking about a case where two people are challenging. What we must be referring to is could go in the mechaskinan way. Bavua Dahai the Kohen, where we have a chazaka that his father was a Kohen. The Nafakalei Kola, the Ben Grusha Ben Chalutzahu. And then we came out the rumor that the son was not a Kohen because the father married a divorcee. And so therefore the son lost the kahuna. And we removed him from the kahuna. And then one witness comes along and says, actually, he is a Kohen. The Askine, and then we brought him up. And then two witnesses came and said he had lost his kahuna because he was the son of a divorcee. And now another witness comes along and supports the first witness that said he's a Kohen. The Kohen who? The Kuli Alma Mitzdarfa. So everybody would say there, yeah, now we have two witnesses. The only concern is we're now reversing ourselves again. So should we be concerned about a mockery of the court? Rabbi Lazar Savar, Kivan de Achtane Lomaskinale. Rabbi Lazar says, look, once we've got rid of him, we're not going to pick him back up because Chashina was Elusa de Beidina. We're worried about the reputation of the court. Rashbag Savar Anan Achtine, Anan Maskine was Elusa de Beidina Lochashinan. And Rashbag says, put him in, we took him out. And we're not going to worry about the zelusa of the court. We're not going to worry about the reputation of the court. So Matzke for Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi says, Yachi, ma'ir yachad, I feel betrayed nami. So if that's the case, Rav Ashi says, why do we only do this case where one person came at the beginning and then one witness came at the end? Even if two witnesses came at the end, we shouldn't put it back because we're reversing the court's decision. So therefore, I don't like your explanation of the case, says Rav Ashi. Elam Rav Ashi, the Kuyama Rochashina was the Lucy de Beidina. No, everybody, even Rabbi Lazar is saying we're not concerned about the reputation of the court. But here, what we're talking about is Bilatzarif Edus Kamifugei Ubapukti Dahani Tanai. Now, here the argument is, can we combine these two witnesses who came in this manner totally separate? One witness came at the beginning, and the other came at the end, and that's the argument. Testimony of two separate witnesses does not combine until both of them see this action as one. But if each one of them saw it separately, for example, Ruvain testified. That one person testified that Ruvain borrowed money from Shimon in front of him, and the second one testified that in front of him, Shimon admitted to Reuven's testimony. We don't combine them. And Rabbi Shimon Karcha says, "Afilu be'ed achar zeh." Rabbi Shimon Karcha says, no, in this case, afilu be'zachar zeh, even one after the other, we would accept their testimony. That's the argument. And also, ein edut miskayemes bezdin, and now they have another case, which is really a totally separate case. And it's really not relevant, but the Gemara is bringing the full brisa, so that's why we have this other case. So the testimony is not going to be upheld in court until they testify at the same time. Meaning to say, but they testify separately, it's not going to be connected. Rabbi Nosson Omar Shomad Verb Shalza Yom Sheyom Chaver Omachar Shomad Verb. Rabbi Nosson says we can hear them on separate things. Okay, we did it. We did Lama Beis and Aleph now because I don't think I'm going to be able to do it later today because I'm going to be in the court. So at least we did 32A and 32B. We'll do on Shabbos and okay. Good. So let me say first of all a big shkoyach to everybody. Shkoyach.